Today we're going to talk about Adichie's Jumping Monkey Hill. Jumping Monkey Hill. The name itself is provocative, suggesting colonialism, racism, exoticism. There are so many problems in this name. And the narrator knows it. Listen to these opening sentences. The cabins all had thatched roofs. Names like Baboon Lodge and Porcupine Place were hand-painted beside the wooden doors that led out to cobblestone paths, and the windows were left open so that guests woke up to the rustling of the jacaranda leaves and the steady calming crash of the sea's waves. The wicker trays held a selection of fine teas. At mid-morning, discreet black maids made the bed, cleaned the elegant bathtub, vacuumed the carpet, and left wildflowers in handcrafted vases. Ujunwa found it odd that the African Writers' Workshop was held here at Jumping Monkey Hill, outside Cape Town. The name itself was incongruous, and the resort had the commonplace of the well-fed about it, the kind of place where she imagined affluent foreign tourists would dart around taking pictures of lizards, and then return home still mostly unaware that there were more black people than red-capped lizards in South Africa. Later, she would learn that Edward Campbell had chosen the resort. He had spent weekends there when he was a lecturer at the University of Cape Town years ago. That first paragraph gives us so much to talk about and directs so many important things that are going to come up throughout the rest of this story. So I'm going to spend most of my time thinking about this first paragraph and then offering you some questions as to how these themes will get played out through the rest of this short story. So to start with, you will notice the description is focused on the Disneyland-esque sort of resort community of Jumping Monkey Hill, right? This is a place people go for their holidays. But when we say people, what we really mean are white foreign tourists. It is the sort of place that gives an authentic African experience, except there's nothing authentic about it, right? It's the sort of place that is playing into a stereotype of the exotic, of the handmade, of wicker, of teas. What are these images pulling together? They're pulling together the images of empire. The images of people in safari hats and safari outfits riding in jeeps and coming back to have tea on the veranda while served by the black waitstaff. And that is exactly what we see happening at Jumping Monkey Hill. Do places like this exist in the world? Absolutely. Are there so many things that are problematic about them? Yes. But what we find that Ujunwa finds particularly problematic is that this is the location for the African Writers' Workshop. The African Writers' Workshop. We will learn later in the story that the African Writers' Workshop has brought together promising young authors from various countries in Africa to share their stories, and that these are prize-winning authors. These are the young and up-and-coming literary voices of a continent. The writers will be referred to throughout the story not by their names, but by their countries: the Tanzanian, the Kenyan, the Senegalese woman, the South African, the white South African. Each one bears with them not their own identity, but the identity of their entire nation. And the political and social and literary weight of that is obvious. And yet, they're having this conference at a place that is the epitome of European colonial stereotypes about Africa. And then we learn why. Because one of the only named characters in the story, Edward Campbell, chose the resort. Because it's where he used to spend his weekends while he was at the University of Cape Town as a lecturer. We learn later that Edward and his wife Isabel are from Europe, that he is connected to all the best literary agents. He can help these young writers get everything they dream of: literary fame, good contracts, publications in wider European and American markets. He also has very definite understandings of what is okay and what is not okay in literature. And we see these themes developing as Ujunwa's story is slowly revealed. What we find is that eating together in this story is a mark of power, a way that power is played out. And in fact, what happens more than the eating together is the drinking together. We find that the European male gaze is problematic, and it aligns with the European literary gaze. It is something that Yu Junhwa, as a female writer, wants and also detests. Just like all of the writers gathered want the literary power that Edward represents and also detest it. And so the tension of this complicity in a gaze that objectifies. And we'll see this paralleled throughout the literary power and gendered power, and the way in which both manipulate and also dismiss. Toward the end, we find that Ujunwa's story is really about a woman trying to get a job, Chimora, in Nigeria, and her story is considered to be unbelievable. Edward declares it unbelievable that a good-looking young woman might be sexually harassed in her workplace, and says that the ending would never happen and that it's just a political story. On the other hand, he praises the story of military violence and civil unrest as exactly revealing the heartbeat of Africa. So what's going on here? Why is a story of military unrest the heartbeat of a place and a story of gendered power unbelievable? One of the things we start to see in this is that Edward's gaze is very comfortable with things that affirm his worldview. You see, the idea that Africa has somehow fallen apart, that individual countries and that the continent as a whole can't hold itself together now that European power has removed itself, that fits into a certain self-conception that the white establishment wants. Colonialism wasn't all that bad, see? Look at the way we kept the peace among people who can't keep the peace themselves. So the story of civil unrest and violence, that actually suits his political agenda and his own identity. The problem is the idea of a lecherous old guy ogling a woman. Well, guess what? That's what he's been doing through the entire story to Junhwa. It's interesting that's the story he finds unbelievable. Of course that's political. Of course that couldn't happen. So as you read this story, I want you to really think about what endings are considered plausible in literature. Why are there some stories that we dismiss as impossible, something that couldn't happen? Do we do that because we just don't want to acknowledge them? Are the stories we say are implausible, are those just simply the stories that threaten us in the way Ujunwa's story threatens Edward? Think about that while you read Jumping Monkey Hill.